Hi, this is Randy Randall of No Age and host of the podcast Hyphenate with Randy Randall. I want to welcome our newest sponsor of the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Hyphenate listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/HYPHENATE. Go get your music streaming everywhere now.
A lot of people think my music is about Vikings and stuff like that, but it's not. It's about nature. It's about our relation to nature and those traditions, the older, the traditions we used to have that came from an animistic root, so to speak.
Yes, what's happening? Welcome to Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. This is our show for Thursday, January 23rd. Thank you so much for being here. I am very excited for my guest today. It is none other than Einar Selvik of Warduna. Warduna, I guess, yeah. I got so excited listening back to his interview. I love his Norwegian tinted English. I want to speak like that all the time. You'll hear it coming up. But Einar has done a lot of music, fitting him into the video game theme. This is our final video game themed episode. He did the music for a video game called Assassin's Creed. I know nothing about video games, but I remember that as a name. I think it became a movie at one point, so I know that. But he talks about doing traditional music from a time period that would fit the setting of the video game and sort of draw it into that place. So, I feel like that lands him in the video game theme month, but also just music is incredible in general. I'd want to talk to him anyway. His group Warduna has a new record, Birna. It's out now. It's about the bear. You'll hear in our interview you just heard up top that, he draws inspiration from nature and kind of lets nature be his muse in all things Warduna. He's also done music for the show Vikings, and has a deep relationship with traditional instrumentation and traditional music of Norway. So very, very fun interview, and it was really great getting to sit down and talk with him. I appreciate him taking the time and all across all the time zones we had to do, talking from Norway to Southern California. I feel very fortunate. I mentioned a little bit in an interview, but No Age has gotten the opportunity to play shows and tour in Norway more times than I would have ever imagined. We met a good friend, Line, who was a booking and promoter person through the art museum, the Contemporary Art Museum in Bergen, and we played there several times on European tours. And then we ran into her at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and she was like, "We should just do a whole Norway tour." And this was at a time, I think, when Dean and I were in between records, and it was excited. Dean and I got excited to do this. I think it was 6 dates, just all in Norway. It was all fly-ins, and it was great. We made a 7-inch for it, that 2 songs that we hadn't released anywhere else. We recorded it and made something special just for that tour of Norway. And man, it was magical. I think this was like 2015, 2016-ish, sometime in that round, about 10 years ago. But it's incredible, just the sights and the sounds and the people and the food, and you really just feel like you're at the top of the earth. You're on like the edge of land. We were there in the summer where the sun stays out, 24 hours a day, or just kind of dips down just a little bit into the horizon. Sort of feels like it gets, it's like midnight, and it's just a little bit like almost kind of just like sunset, and then it comes back out again. And just being jet lagged. I don't know. There's a lot of things that probably made it feel very magical. Mostly probably the jet lag, and but just surrealness of the sun being up out all night and playing music, and you go outside and it's 10 o'clock, and then you're like, oh, okay, here I am. Man, it is a wild time. Definitely a land of magic and mystery. And Einar's music fits perfectly in such a place. Go hear the new Warduna album, Birna, out now. You can get more information on tour dates and where to buy the record and all the videos and all the other greatness that is Warduna at warduna.com. It's the best place to go to follow up on everything that Einar is doing with the band right now. And they think they will be touring, coming to Los Angeles at the Greek sometime this upcoming year in 2025. So keep your eyes peeled if that is up your alley, because it's definitely up my alley. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening and recommending the show to their friends. You can write me at Hyphenate halftime@gmail.com. It's got that figured out. I feel like I wasn't checking it for a couple months. I just waited through like, oh, okay. That's why I thought it was pushing to another email address, but it wasn't set up properly. So now I'm reading all the great emails that you have sent in, and I appreciate it. I'm writing back to everyone. And, but yeah, let me know. Let me know what you're up to. Let me know what your Hyphenate gig is. I want to hear what you're up to. I want to hear what your bands are doing. Go to distrokid.com/hyphenate/VIP. No, /VIP. Something like that. You know, you heard that in the beginning from the new sponsor, DistroKid. And yeah, send me your demos. I want to hear what you guys are up to. And without further ado, here is the interview with Einar Selvik from Warduna. Einar, thank you so much for joining me on Hyphenate this morning. How are you doing, sir?
Hello, sir. Great to be here. And, yeah, pleasure
awesome.
To be here.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on. I love the new record. It's beautiful. And
thank you so much.
But as expected, you know, with your past records, I mean, it's you've set yourself. You know, there's a very high bar, I think, to pass, and it seems to be this one meets and exceeds.
Well, I'm very happy to hear. For me, it's of course from my perspective, it's difficult to it's difficult to have that like external measuring system.
Of course,
for me, it's just it's just a journey, and I'm creating the music I sort of wanna hear myself. Yeah, you never know what's gonna how it's gonna turn out and how it will speak to people. So that's always a very exciting and interesting process, really, to see how and if it speaks to people.
Right, yeah, almost like sending children out into the world or something, a creation out into the world, and you go, how are they received? I know how I raised them. I know where they came from, and when they weren't well behaved, and I try to do my best, but we'll see how people respond to them.
It lives its own life, and it has to stand on its own feet. So there is definitely room for comparing the two.
Yes, yeah. So on the podcast, I talk to people who are active in many creative circles, and I think for you, you've had a life in a few different music projects, and even now in this current state, you have the band and also composition, and you've worked on film and television as well as being a performing artist and as well. So we'll touch on some of those aspects to it of your career and as you create, if that's okay, if that works for you. But I'd love to start at the beginning. Where how did you first come to music? How did you first find, your creativity in music?
I think I can remember being 2 years old and watching someone play the drums on television. And I just became obsessed. And when I was 3, I was given for like a Yule present. I was given like a toy drum kit when I was 3, and absolutely smashed it in a few days. So it didn't last long. But then when I was 7 or 8, I was actually, because I had siblings who were like playing in bands and sort of semi-active in that scene. And one of their friends, they sort of had a 60s Sonore drum kit just lying in the basement, gathering dust. And I was given this drum kit. So I guess that's when I like really started to play an instrument properly. And I don't know, I realized quite early that playing like cover songs and other people's music wasn't my thing. So that was a driving factor for me to learn to play other instruments, and compose songs and write lyrics, and and then in my early teenage years I was given a 4-track cassette recorder, and that of course was the next step, because then I didn't depend on other people to create a song or record a song, and I guess that creative part of it took more and more over, and yeah, painting the whole picture is became more important than any of the instruments.
Do you still have your 4-track? Do you still have that same 4-track?
Yes, I do.
I wonder if I could hold mine up here. Let's see. I've got some headphones on it. Hold on. Let's see. Oh. This is the Tascam MK2. Is that what this is? The Porta Studio 424.
Yeah. That's a nice one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a Fostex.
Oh, those are great too.
They were a slightly simpler version than the one you're.
This just has EQ. It's not, it's not really that exciting. It looks more exciting than it is. I think as a kid, it's like, so many knobs. What do I do with each of these knobs? And then, within a few years, like, oh, okay, it's just a little EQ on there, but it looks impressive. But what a great sort of passport into creative layering.
Yeah.
And what were you playing? Were you learning guitar, synths, and piano, or acoustic instruments?
Mostly guitar, bass. Did some vocals, but not really a lot. But enjoyed it. But mostly making it for someone else to execute. And wrote lyrics. So
kind of like demos that you would show the rest of the band. Is that what you mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, exactly. Demoing up things. The occasional keyboard. But I was mostly doing metal music at that point. Metal music, or just silly, weird things, experimenting, having fun. Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Really, it was a lot of fun. And of course, I grew up with a lot of different music in my home as well. Metal being the dominant factor, I would say, rock and metal. But
that comes from your older siblings.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about your parents? What were they listening to?
I wasn't so fond of my mom's music taste, but my dad, he listened a lot to classical music, and which I really like, and also did back then. And also some traditional stuff. Or historic music, things like that, cinematic things. So I really liked music like that, visual music, and I guess that's the branch that I sort of went down in terms of metal as well. The more I call it visual, but
I like that term, visual music. It's like soundtrack. Or accompaniment.
And more the metal music that was more connected to perhaps classical melodicness and but also like here in Norway, a lot of metal music was very much inspired by traditional music, and I really like that as well. So yeah. In terms of my 4-track, it was a lot of those things going on.
How fun! That sounds exciting. And when you say traditional music, I mean, is it what I guess in the States we sometimes call it like a folk music? It's like a folk tradition, folk. Or is it how do you sort of? So maybe tell me a little bit more about that style of music. I don't know it, and obviously inherently as well.
Yeah, and I guess the folk music term in the US is a little bit different than it is over here, where it's more connected to the traditional music scene. But perhaps, of course, folk music is something that is alive, whereas the traditional music is something where you preserve tradition.
I see.
So that's more strict. That's more strict and more historic in a way. Whereas the folk music, that's more a living thing. You include modern input. It sort of lives its life. It can have elements of the traditional stuff, but
inspired by. But the traditional songs are the ones that have been passed down for generations.
Exactly. And mostly with traditional instruments or song. Anything from like jaw harp to various types of fiddles. Flutes, overtone flutes. Some branches have accordion. That's a little bit later and more horrible. And like these harp sitters and various traditional older instruments. So I was more into that part, I would say, certain parts of it, not the very jolly type, but the more melancholic.
Which part of Norway were you living in when you grew up?
So I'm born and I'm born on a place called Osterøy. It's an inland island north of Bergen on the west coast of Norway.
Okay.
So that's where I was born and raised.
Wow.
A pretty rural place, like postcard Norway. With the fjords and the mountains and all of that.
It's all there.
But at the same time, very close to Bergen, which is the second largest city in Norway. So, and a city that has a really good art and music community. A lot of the artists who from Norway who end up having an international career, they are very often coming from that scene.
I see. I play in a band here in the States, and we've gotten to travel through Norway quite a few times. So we've played. Bergen was sort of our home base at the art museum there. Lena would book us there in the art museum in Bergen.
Nice.
Quite often, and it was beautiful. And she helped us set up other shows. We went up as far north as Tromsø, and it was gorgeous, beautiful. And then kind of came down. We were sort of doing fly-ins, and it was incredible. Really, the more time we spent there, it was just fall in love. It's an easy place to fall in love with.
Absolutely, it's like. So when you drive through that area, like Lofoten, which is also up north there, it's like pouring honey into your eyes or something like that. It just becomes too much after a while. It's too much beauty.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, it was and very inspiring though too. And I think in a lot of ways, and I think maybe it was the jet lag, or it was the sun being up at midnight, or there's just the sense of magic and sort of surreality sort of filled us at that point. I think it's maybe something closer to a 12-hour flight, if not longer, some layovers in Hamburg. So there's a whole, all my time there has always been very, very intoxicating.
I can imagine. Imagine wintertime when it's dark.
It's the other side of the coin. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a different ball game. But you get the Northern Lights though, which are pretty spectacular as well.
Wow. Yeah. And was that a common occurrence for you to see the Northern Lights where you lived, or was it?
Only on rare occasions where I lived.
But further north.
Yeah, further north,
Tromsø,
it's much more common. But this year, actually, it's been so much Northern Lights, even in the whole country basically.
Wow.
So it's a lot of solar storms going on. So then we get it this far south as well.
Wow, that must be wild.
It is pretty surreal when the sky is dancing. The light is dancing around the sky. It's the stuff of myths,
right?
For sure.
Yeah, and then and somebody in a creative position, there's sort of that feeling of like, okay, how do you take all of this in, and how do you not respond in some way, or have some kind of conversation with nature? Is that something that plays a big factor into even as you were developing kind of from 4-track and adolescent and through metal? Were those elements there at that point, or was that kind of through maturing that you began to notice those more?
I think that has been there in a way, because I'm pretty much what's the word, illiterate when it comes to reading or writing music. So for me, it's a very it's a thing I hear or I see it, and then I chase it in a way, go by the air. But so sometimes, and I still work like that. That some things you work with are so, have such a power or charisma or something that I can just hear the sound of it in a way, and then it's about chasing it down, hunting those sounds or songs or words or whatever shape it takes.
Translating and what you hear in your head on to come out of the speakers. It's like, I hear it in here. Now what do I need to put down?
Yeah, and that can be pretty. That's not plug and play. That can be. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it finds its shapes very quickly, but other times it's you have to go a few rounds before you're able to capture it. And sometimes it just takes on a different form once it manifests, I guess. So, but so I guess that's a way of. I think I've always thought and felt music in that way.
And in the current step, I guess I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm just so curious, as you are, like you said, early days creating demos and to give to other musicians in the band, is that something you still do now? Do you play the majority of the instruments on the current records, and then you have a band that you sort of employ for specialty, sort of, whether it's singing or other type of instruments, or what does that look like within your kind of creative process between you and the other musicians?
On the albums of Warduna, I play most of the instruments and I do most of the vocals. Of course, I work. The person who contributes most, apart from me, is of course Lindify Hella, which is also part of the creative process on certain things. And in terms of the others. It is certain things I want other people to do, because they have a different way of doing it than I would, I play with people who have a lot of personality in their style of playing as well, and sometimes that is what you need. Not always, but sometimes you need some sort of friction or character. So I guess I do both. Sometimes I play instruments that some of my live band members would do as well. But on other occasions, I sort of have a vision of what I want them to do, and we, that's the starting point at least, and we see.
So a flavor to add to the dish or to the stew. You know who these players are and what they bring. You're like, I'm imagining a small taste of this, but then they can give you so much more once they take it. And
and sometimes I even go externally if there are some really specific things I'm hunting for. I go for other people I know or know of, or so I'm quite anything goes, and of course the creative concept of Warduna is very much about interpreting any given theme on its own premises. That means that it is the theme itself that it plays the biggest part in determining what instruments I use, what sounds I use, where I record, when I record, with whom I record, what state I'm in when I'm recording, time of day, time of year, the list, whatever and whoever and whenever, if it brings it closer to, as close as possible to whatever it is I'm expressing. So in a way you could say it's the theme that is the composer and I'm the instrument.
And you interpret the theme in ways that it calls to you. It demands a certain
and of
execution.
Course sometimes it's a very sometimes it's in some occasions it's a very easy thing, if you make a song about the birch tree, that would mean I would go into the forest and play on birch trees. I use the sound of the bark, the wind in the leaf, the playing on the branches, etc. Many things, but of course there are things that are more abstract, where you have to think differently. I try to do recordings in spaces of relevance, and added value is added value, whether or not you perceive it consciously or subconsciously. I'm 100% sure that you will notice a difference, because there is a difference. I could chop off a table leg and get the same sound as a birch tree, but but then it's not the birch tree from the forest that is alive, full of water, and it's added value.
I think there's something to as well as even with interacting within a space or kind of recording on location instead of bringing the world inside of the studio, going out to the world. Your performance or the performance of the musician is also changed just by that. You may let a note just sustain because you're in a space and there's so much drawing your attention or your presence, or you're interacting with a space. Whereas if you were in a small dead studio with no echo, with nothing, you may overplay a part or play it, with a different intensity, or just your approach as a performer is so different dependent on the spaces and the type of material as well. You may not just hit the one note in the studio because you feel like, I didn't do a very good job. I only played one note today. Whereas if you were to travel some, long distance to kind of get to a place, and then you ring this one note in the area where it just blooms and blossoms and unfolds and unfurls and changes your molecular makeup. And you're like, that was the note that needed to be played, and I've captured it.
Of course, space is the fifth element in a way. It's the mask. It's it plays such a big part. One thing is, it does something to you. It does something to your surroundings. Will of course reflect on who you are and how you behave and how you think, etc. And that's of course that's what performance is about, in as well, and that's something that is really important in how we've approached performing live as well. Space has always played a big part in that, because we realized at a very early point that the power of of playing in a space that complements the music itself, where you create this massive synergy effect where 2 plus 2 becomes 5 all of a sudden. Because of that, because of the space playing along or amplifying the contents of the art, makes it so much more powerful for the audience listening, but also for us on the stage, and of course that that's been a real important part of it, and I think that is also part of why it has part of the success it has as well, because because of that synergy, because of being not compromising the art in that sense, being patient, taking the right the right occasions where we could do this, rather than just jumping on the hype train that of course was happening like in the beginning, whereas suddenly there was a lot of opportunities, but daring to say no and just take the right ones. That's actually a really big part of why I think we're having this success today.
It's just finding the right places to feature the music and to sort of collaborate and work with presenting the music. Yeah.
Where we can be us.
Yeah, that brings me to kind of the idea of your work in the video game world. How did that come to you, and how did you find that, and what was that experience like for you?
Well, I guess so. I guess it's that branch of my work. It perhaps started with my work on the TV show Vikings. Both, of course, they used a lot of the music of Warduna, but they also I was also part of working on the soundtrack, both together with the main composer Trevor Morris, but also directly with the composer and know the production and doing things that the musical inputs that was happening in front of the camera as well. You know, like the My Mother Told Me song that the two brothers in the show sing. That's something I wrote, and anything from drunken songs to like the music that was sung during a funeral or all sorts of things, which was really an interesting and fun project to be part of. I learned a lot. It was a steep learning curve to suddenly. I had done like small gigs for TV and film before, but never anything at that scale. So, and I guess after that, a lot of requests for both film, TV, but also various video games came in that period. But I try to be very selective in what I do. I need to feel that I'm able to do a good job, and of course my calendar comes into play in those terms as well. If I don't want to do things halfway, so it has to fit. And I guess when the people from Ubisoft got in touch with us for the Assassin's Creed thing, there was a lot of things that aligned and made that possible. Also, the fact that their vision of what they wanted my place in it to be was very much aligned with my own thing. Whereas my main for that job, we were three composers working on it, and my job was more on the in-game musical soundscape, like whatever you would hear when you walked into a into a longhouse, or that music would be like the core of what I was doing.
Okay, it's like the diegetic music that's happening inside the scene.
Yeah. And give voice to the skaldic tradition, the bardic tradition of the North, which is something I always felt like is completely disregarded whenever like Viking Age or things like that is portrayed. That the oral tradition and the role of the skald is always just discarded, whereas it was actually a pretty central and important part of those oral societies. So being given the chance to give voice to that tradition was something that was in fact, a deciding factor for me to take that job.
Tell me a little bit
I really wanted to do.
Tell me about that tradition. It's like an a cappella singing.
It's poetry predominantly. It's and of course you have to. A skald was sort of. It was much more than a storyteller or a singer or a poet. Their role. They were, in terms of kings and chieftains and stuff, they were the closest person following them, writing down their accounts. Of course, doing political propaganda in their sagas and their stories and their poems. Of course, it's a political tool, and that could go both ways. Like in not so nice poetry. It actually had a quite profound power and effect back then in these oral societies. But apart from that, the skald, they were the sort of the news forecasters of the time. They were also the genealogists who know the history of the people, of the various families. They knew the whole lineage, and they were the seers, the sort of people with who had this cross. I don't know the English word for it, but the stepping at the side to see what's actually going on here. That kind of vision.
Somewhere between tabloid journalism and almost predictive, Nostradamus like sort of thing.
Yeah.
They know they know the dirt and they can see where it's going to go. Like, but really, this is the backstory of what's happening.
Yeah, and these people were they were actually the highest. This was, of course, a class society, and it was as a free man. It was the highest sort of status you could have, being a free man. That was a skald, and it's pretty similar. We see if you compare the tradition here to for instance, in the one in Ireland, which we even know more about. It's a lot of things you can compare, and it's very similar system, and it's a tradition that is very much connected to the aristocracy, you could say. Also in terms of the instruments that was connected to this tradition, and also the poetry they wrote. That I would say that's our sort of perhaps most important contribution here in the North to the world literature. It's a highly complex type of poetry that is. I have so much respect for that craft. It's so impressive, and the system they use in order to do it, and it's very clever and advanced.
Wow!
So that is basically the tradition I was allowed to give voice to, as sort of the main thing. But then for special missions and stuff like that in the game, I would sort of produce these a selection of these songs into like the more the more visual landscape of Warduna. I would Wardunify them, so to say.
Wow. So I could see, it offers a unique opportunity or aspect to sort of explore something you were already interested in, and yet find a home for it within a piece of popular culture. So it's a unique nexus that meets for a project like that.
Yeah, and of course in Warduna, I'm more free in terms of than I was. I was a bit more strict in my music for the game in terms of what instruments I would use, and because it's more time specific, of course. Whereas in Warduna, I'm not recreating music from any specific time period. My instruments range back to Stone Age, Bronze Age, Migration period, Viking period, medieval times, modern. Take something old and create something new with it, rather than copying it, reimagining it. At the same time, it has always been really important for me in this project to not climb into trees that doesn't have roots. So standing on solid ground in terms of what we know about these things have been important. So my approach, both in terms of the ethnomusicology as well as the themes I'm singing about, or is to approach it academically first, and then to stand on solid ground before I go into the intuitive, creative processes, basically.
Tell me a little bit about some of the instrumentation. I mean, I see a few stringed instruments behind you, but how do you find them, or there's traditionalist people making them now? I mean, tell me a little bit about that. I'm very unfamiliar with those types of instruments.
Well, now it's more common because, of course, the last 10 years or so, the interest for these things has exploded in a way. But when I started, like in the beginning, early 2000s, there was not a lot of knowledge or people working with them or making them, or maybe a handful of people. Some of the instruments even less. You had to really dig deep to get people to make them, or in some cases I made the instruments myself in that period, and
based on diagrams or of photos or descriptions,
based on archaeological findings.
Wow.
Descriptions in literature, drawings or paintings. And that's sort of what you have to work with. But luckily, some of the instruments actually have a living tradition. So, for instance, like some of the horn instruments, we use some big bronze lures, they're called, which are they very often come in mirrored couples. They are sort of mimicking the horns of the auroch, the ancient bull of Northern Europe, or that's what we think they do. And they are the oldest ones I guess are about 3,000 years old. And we have the same type of instruments like in the early Viking Age, and we have them still today. And of course, they were used as means of communication. The oldest ones we think also had a place in ritual music, but these instruments are completely locked to the harmonic scale. So it's a very limited what you can and cannot do on it. So in a way, whatever you play on it, it's to a certain degree authentic. You can call it authentic.
Those are the same. Also, based on the design, the series of notes that are possible to be played on it are intrinsic to the design. It's not a chromatic scale. We could play jazz, and you could play updated type of Western music.
No. It's completely locked.
Yeah.
So it's
like finding a voice
from like an overtone flute.
But it's like finding a voice from something far away. You're hearing the same notes and the same scales that they would have heard. just based on those designs.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And we have other instruments that are also a living tradition, like the goat's horn, for instance, which is a tradition where you use either horns from goats or cows, and you make playing holes on them. And this is something, the oldest archaeological findings of these are from, I think, 400 BC. And that's an instrument we find throughout, and we have still today, very much connected to farm life as well. Examinations of these instruments show that the tonality of them, the interval of the notes you can play on them, it didn't really change from the ones from 400 BC to the ones we find like 100 years ago, which we have, of course, notations and so on from. So we know, here we can talk about a tonality very much linked to our lullabies, for instance. They are very well suited for that, have that like melancholic sound to them. Then, of course, like some of these string instruments that you see behind me, an instrument that I use a lot is the lyre, which is most likely the instrument of, if the skald had an instrument, it would probably be like a lyre, which is almost like a small harp. The Germanic lyre had mostly six strings. I used a later one from Norway that also have 7 strings. It would be, this is an instrument type you see in the Arabic countries. They had it in ancient Greece, in ancient Egypt, and also in northern Europe. The most common string instrument.
Small
Viking
handheld
period.
harps, not like what we think of the large harps that you sit on the floor. This one's you hold in your hand and can pluck the strings. Yeah. And again, is
perfect for accompanying poetry or storytelling or singing.
And what type of scale?
We even know how
tuning?
it was tuned.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Yeah, how was that tuned?
Yeah, and this we know because of a non-Nordic source describes it in the, I believe, 700. We have the accounts of a Frankish monk describing. He's explaining something, some musical theory, and in a digression, he makes a point of he says, like the Germanic lyre, and then in this digression he describes how a Germanic lyre always is tuned, or the way he says it is. That he really indicates that there is one way of tuning the Germanic lyre, and that way of tuning it really makes sense to other sources we have that also Nordic sources or things from the British Isles. And even some musical fragments we have, which makes perfect sense with this description of the tuning.
And as you're composing, for Warduna, are these instruments all? They must all be tuned to each other. Is this a traditional tuning that's used, or how is it? So how do you come about this? Is there compromise made in some ways?
Yeah, they are tuned, and I have over the years I've acquired quite a few different horns and different instruments that I can have different versions that fit together more.
An ensemble. They're sort of within a harmonic family.
Yeah. And of course, I also use it would be like the great grandfather of the fiddle or the rebec or something like that. These old bowed instruments. The oldest one we know from the north is is something called a taglharpa, or simply a bowed lyre. It varies from having 2 strings to 4 strings. The word tagl means horsehair, so it's a horsehair fiddle, and similar to the instrument you see in the Far East or Mongolia or China, where you don't have a fingerboard where you press the string down, you just touch the string. This is the case also with these instruments, and also that it's of course a drone-based instrument where you have one drone string and one melody string, often tuned in fourths or fifths, and you only have this space. So that is also a very limited instrument in terms of what you can and cannot do on it. So it's pretty authentic stuff. Just by and just the sound of the horsehair strings as well. It just has this texture that it feels like a time travel for me whenever I use them.
There's something exciting about that. I think, just almost within the restrictions. It's like, okay, this is my sandbox, or this is my area, and within that, it's limitless. But where you must live in this zone, in this area, and then you go, okay, but here's how I can express myself through this.
Exactly, and I have to say, I prefer those limitations. It sharpens my creativity. Mm-hmm. If I take like a nyckelharpa, a key fiddle, where the options are like everything, you can play everything there. Yeah. It's just, too many possibilities is not often the advantage.
It's enough rope to hang yourself with. You could.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think, and especially in looking to, compose these larger pieces or in response to themes, then with your immense knowledge of the traditional sort of sounds that are possible, in some ways you're pulling, tools and colors and from a palette that you have, and so the restraints, or is in some ways it's it's just part of the ensemble, and it does exactly what it does, and that's the only thing that can do that thing. So it's a very freeing sort of idea of like, oh, I have the sound from that will do that, and then when you need lower sounds or more percussive sounds, or more something with larger range, then you can pull those things out. You can kind of find that
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, but that's my starting points is very often one of these elements that are more limited, or and of course, depending on what it is I'm doing, I of course play on trees, stones, water, fire. The sound of torches ripping the air, or and sometimes that is the starting point, where everything grows from those things.
That's incredible. And then, are you engineering most of this stuff yourself as well, or do you have a team that you employ to sort of do that, to capture the sounds?
It's very much a do-it-yourself project. So I guess the first album I spent 7 years from the first recording to the last recording, and of course a lot of that was doing all the research, learning how the instruments work, building instruments, or getting people to build them for me, but also learning to record. It was a lot of trial and error, and figuring out how to paint the picture that I had in my head. And that's an ongoing process. I think I still do things probably. There are perhaps easier ways of doing what I'm doing, but you over the years you find your palette, how you like to do things, the workflow you like to.
And if it's not broke, don't fix it. if it works for you, that's it.
Yeah.
But it's stemming from that tradition of a 4-track, this kind of this do it yourself sort of, you have the sound. It's up to you to go, like you say, hunt it down or to find it and make it come out of the speakers. And it's close. And you're the only one that knows the difference between what's in your head and what's coming out of the speakers. So you're your own audience and your own critic to satisfy that.
Yeah, and I make this is especially this is something I've always done for myself. It came out of a very deep felt need to do something. I was at the time, I was playing in various metal bands, and that kind of music was really out of my system on a personal level. And the need to do something that actually resonated.
In that position, you were drumming. I mean, were you employing things like triggers and things like that? That far, right? Okay.
Triggers. I didn't like to use it on other things than just the kick drums.
Of course. That's part of the tradition of that genre of music.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. So it really came out of this need to or void of there being music like this, and so it's something I've always created for myself, and whatever comes after that is a bonus. And in the beginning, I thought it would be too far out for people, but on the other hand, the first people I showed it to, like people, colleagues, or a few people in the industry, some people in my family, they all reacted really strongly to it, also emotionally, and I guess that of course was an indication or indicator that there are more people than me feeling that void for music like that, like done in this way. But yeah, no. The most important rule I have is that it has to come from somewhere that is real, and I guess that's how I work also, or worked as a drummer as well. If I wasn't inspired, I sucked. If it wasn't if I didn't have the energy or the motivation or that it came from somewhere real. Yeah.
So, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, you are in conversation with the world around you, or it's in that kind of way of, it's not like it's not simply self-generated. Like you can just sit alone in an empty box in a void and paint a world around you. You are looking to respond to the things that you're seeing and what they're resonating inside of you, and then expressing that back, like in a kind of dialogue. Does that sound more accurate?
A dialogue is dialogue is definitely what it is, and the weird thing is that whenever I go into something new, a new song, it's like I have to relearn how to make a song. It's really weird, and I don't know. I don't know why it is like that, but very often that's what it feels like. It's like a, but also I don't make music like verse, refrain, verse, refrain. Sometimes there are patterns like that, but that's more because that is what fits.
Right.
But
it's like a human having you have two arms, you have two parts. There's a certain symmetry to things that can be created.
Definitely. Sometimes you need a counter or you need a balance of some sort. But the most important thing is to let the song go where it wants to go. Rather than me like pushing it into a shape that I decided beforehand, and that is a challenging process to not have decided where it's going before it goes there. Of course, sometimes I have that vision very clearly, but I would say most of the time I don't, and it just finds its form.
You're answering,
or we find it together.
Yeah, in some ways, you're answering the question that you've set out. Like, this is the dialogue that's been asked of me, or something. The quest that you've been put upon, and then when you find the answer, it's through experimentation or through the journey of the song.
Yeah, but isn't that what a song is? A problem?
Should be, yeah.
Or
a question to be answered.
A question or a problem, or there needs to be some friction
to motivate or action.
Yeah. I think the best songs are the best problems or questions.
Yeah,
in a way.
Absolutely. It makes sense. I think, I think as a writer and composer and kind of just general guitarist, musician, I think there's often been those kinds of, I've found myself in those positions, like, what would happen if? What would this sound like? And do it all backwards, or do something that isn't correct. I find myself a lot having a dialogue within like a craft, like a craftsman sort of way, like as a songwriter. I work a lot in punk sort of vernacular and in pop vernacular, and where it's a 3.5 minute song, and it's going to have a middle eight, and it's going to do these things. And I find it's often like, a woodworker or a craftsman, throwing a pot, like I know what the vessel needs to hold water. The song has to fit up within a pop, sort of punk sort of way. And so I can experiment with that. But again, those are my restrictions. At the end of the day, it should hold water. And it's supposed to do something.
A certain amount of water, but the shape, you can.
The color, exactly. There's many ways of going about it, but also in many inspirations. Like, I enjoy the way this songwriter has written songs, or but what would this sound like mixed with this, or these kind of experiments or something going. And I've often found too, that even if I'm inspired by something, probably through my own lack of talent, that it always sounds different. This is my version of this person's song, and it comes out sounding very much more like me playing it, not that's lack of trying. It's been interpreted or filtered or something.
Yeah, but how it comes through you, but that's the beauty of it. I think that it finds its own form when it's transported through your own way of experiencing it. That's something I recognize myself in what you say, for sure.
And sometimes I'll play the song and I enjoy it quite well, but I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm ripping off the Wipers, or I'm ripping off Black Flag, and other people will come up and like, that's great. That's the most original thing I've ever heard. And it's not for me to disabuse them of that. I'm not, I don't think it's a legal issue, but it's more of a, me citing my sources. I'm wearing the t-shirt on stage. Okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. If you enjoy it, that's great too, because I enjoy it. I find there's a reason for it to exist. It doesn't feel necessarily redundant, but it's a question, and I try to have a sense of humility about it. I'll call myself out. I'll be the first one to say who I've ripped off, but
we're all affected by what we experience.
Sure.
And when you work with crafting art, whether it's conscious or subconscious or very obvious or just related, of course it will find its way in there.
Yeah.
I can hear things in my music and then I see a film that I watched a lot as a young kid, and wait a minute.
Hey, there's the germ, the seed of the idea.
Or just the feel or something like that. Of course,
of course. We're part of communities.
We're sponges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we live on a timeline. And is there, or have you received people from the traditional background, and how do they take what you were doing? Because obviously you are not, you were using elements of a traditional type of a traditional music, but you, like you've said, you're going further with it. You're adding your own. Is there what does that dialogue look like with the traditional music community? Do they like what you're doing? Do they dislike it? Is it seen as a bastardization, or seen as pushing it forward?
No, as far if they understand that I'm not trying to do traditional music, then it's all good.
Yeah.
But if that is what they think I'm doing, they will feel that this is not right, or especially in the beginning, I think it was like that. They see this guy coming from the metal scene playing all of a sudden playing these historical instruments that we have more kinship to in our scene. And then I was so I guess especially in the beginning it was both types of reactions, which is completely understandable. But no, a lot of people from that scene. I have many friends there. It's and I know a lot of people enjoy and are inspired by what I do as well. But of course, you need to understand the premise of what I'm trying to do as well. Same thing goes with the people from academia in the beginning who thought I was trying to recreate Viking Age music or whatever, which I wasn't. And I know I take conscious decisions when I break the rules and whatnot. So once they understood that I'm actually quite serious and quite nerdy about my academic sources and work, as well as the musical side, we became very good friends. And I do lots of lectures in universities together with the scholars and even for the scholars in some cases.
That's great. I mean, the attention that you're bringing to the music and to the instruments and to the traditions, I mean, it must serve as a first, I think, like speaking for myself, I mean, it's the first sort of brush with something I didn't know much about. To kind of, as it served as an introduction through video games and film and television, and pop, and this and operating in a pop culture sort of sphere that would, I imagine, touch more people than some of the academic and more traditional things necessarily would. And not that one's better than the other, but if anything, you were being so open about it and pointing, if you're interested here, there are more places to go if you want more of this kind of music. I mean, yours isn't the beginning and end. You didn't just think of it by yourself. Obviously, you wear your influences and the traditions, and you're a signpost in many ways. Like if you find yourself here, don't stop the journey. There's more to discover if you like this.
Yeah,
I think is great.
Creating interest, but then again, for me, it's my music is it is that it has that contemporary bridge that you need for it to resonate, for history to resonate today. You need to have some angle that people can relate to. And of course, my music, a lot of people think my music is about Vikings and stuff like that, but it's not. It's about nature. It's about our relation to nature and those traditions, the older, the traditions we used to have that came from an animistic root, so to speak. So our music is about our relation to nature, to each other, and to something that is bigger than yourself. Whether or not it's a spiritual thing or a philosophical thing doesn't really matter. And so whenever I take something from the past into the present, I don't just regurgitate something from back then. I take it into the contemporary and I recite it, but I also go into what does it mean? What does it tell us? And my focus is always on the things that still resonate. And of course, a lot of these things nature shapes culture. Wherever it's shaped, it is the nature and the resources, the people living there in that space that created that culture. And that is why these things still speak to us. And that is why there are so many similarities around the planet when you go far enough back in time as well, because that mechanism is exactly the same. And And so this is also why I think our music speaks to people globally and limitless in terms of age, ethnicity. It's all sorts of people. I think these things are so ancient or timeless, even, that it's like it's in our DNA. A lot of these things. You have certain things that you will find in music, in ethnic music, absolutely everywhere on this planet. Certain things you always find. One of the things is polyrhythms that you always find, and certain tone intervals also are always present in ethnic music.
And I wonder if so much of that just even relates from just kind of the human body, you know what I mean? Our heartbeat and our sort of voice and what we can kind of do, just sort of within our own kind of biology and where we draw from that. I mean, I would imagine that's the one constant from the sub-Saharan desert to, northern, Arctic Norway. That there's, but the people are the people, right? And it's sort of those desires and inspirations.
And the knowledge of what it does to us, in earlier times, people were more patient, and this had a more prominent place in their lives, or it has a prominent place in our lives as well, but more as a consumerism. We are bombarded with entertainment constantly.
Yeah.
Whereas in their lives, it would be much more profound and rare and special whenever it. So the notion of what certain things does to you would be so much more powerful, and you would be so much more conscious about it. And that's how a tradition is built. You build on what works. That is what you cultivate, the stuff that works, and you fine tune it and you build on it. And of course, polyrhythms is such a, that, or at least I know that if I put a beat that is polyrhythmical in a certain tempo, I know that people will go like this automatically.
Children, small children will do it to older people. It's not even spans everything.
Exactly, it's just
the body
in us.
Responds.
It's in us, and
I love it. Well, Einar, thank you so much for taking the time here. I don't want to cut you off there, but I also don't want to take up too much of your time. We've gone past the hour mark by 5 minutes. I want to let you get on with your life. The new album. How do you pronounce the new album? I don't want to butcher it.
With my pronunciation, I say it Birna, but Birna.
Birna, it's the bear.
Yeah, the she bear. That's what it means. The she bear.
It's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
It's out. It's out now. It's out now when this podcast goes out, and you'll be touring the States as well, coming up in 2025.
That's the plan. We are doing single shows, and not sure when this podcast will go out, but we plan to announce more US shows as well in very shortly after the album is released.
Great. Well, that should be around this time. So where do people find out more information about you and about the band and the tours? What's the best way to do that?
Well, I think in this world of shitty algorithms and that crap.
Yeah.
I tend to want people to go to warduna.com, and I would also recommend them to, if you want to. I recommend them to sign up for the newsletter as well. We won't spam you. We only post when there are important things happening, such as a tour announcement, album announcements, or other things that. But in any case, go to warduna.com. There you find the links to all our socials and where you can stream our music and other info as well.
Fantastic. Awesome, Einar. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure is mine, sir.
Yes, there he is, Einar Selvik, Warduna, the new album Birna, out now. Go to warduna.com, like he said, to get all the updates on tour dates when they will be in your town, and to go listen to and get links to where to buy the music and support the band. They are incredible. They have beautiful videos as well. So don't miss out. Don't sleep on this incredible new record, and go back and hear all their other records and buy their other records too. Why not? And go play some Assassin's Creed, and go watch some Vikings, and go enjoy this this winter season with a very Norwegian kind of vibe. I've heard there is snow in lots of places of the world at this moment. Southern California, not so much snow, lots of fire and recovery from said fires. But I heard there is snow in New Orleans. So, if you're in New Orleans and you want a Norwegian vibe, go listen to some Warduna. That could be an interesting crossover if it's some New Orleans Creole, Norwegian traditional music vibes. I would like to hear what that sounds like. If that's what your band does, if you're a Norwegian Creole Zydeco influenced band, please send me your demos. I'd like to hear these. I would like to check them out. I will review them here live on the show. For everyone else, you can write me at hyphenatehalftime@gmail.com. You can also find me on the old Instagram for now, as social media becomes more and more of a cesspit of weirdness. But I'm still there. I'm at Randy S. Randall on the Instagram. And thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Tell your friends, leave a review wherever you hear this. Let everyone know this is where the good stuff is. And I will see you on Monday with Aaron Farley. Don't miss out.
So when you drive through that area, like Lofoten, which is also up north there, it's like pouring honey into your eyes or something like that. It just becomes too much after a while. It's too much beauty.